Hello, it's Kirks, formerly rank 1 in WildRift, coach for multiple pro teams and your local build dealer. So, for today's video, as I've promised, we're going to talk about the 10 OP builds for the 10 OP champion. So without any further ado, let's hop straight into it. Number 1 on this list is going to be Ezreal, and he will start with a longsword start into a gluttonous grease rush. The 35 AD from these boots and the Omnivamp really increase the power Ezreal has during the laning phase and makes it so much easier for you to kill people. And even delaying your mana immune doesn't matter too much, because you're spamming spells regardless, therefore stacking it up fast enough anyway. With the recent buffs to Trinity Force, we'll also complete this as fast as possible now. Alternatively, you can just go for the Sheen and then go into Bloodthirster. And yeah, with all the changes to how our champion functions, we can just go for the Bloodthirster after the Trinity Force because it grants us so much more AD, and the crit is even nicer to have with the Ascent Reaver later down the road. For runes, we take Kraken, Brutal, Giant Slayer, Alacrity, and Bone Plating. Kraken and Brutal makes our laning phase so much more stronger, and with the high AD from our build, we'll deal even more damage. And if you think about this, just being able to have an auto attack reset on your first ability increases the potency your champion has available by so much. And adding in the attack speed from Alacrity and Trinity Force, plus the bonus attack speed from the Bloodthirster's bonus passive, you'll quickly see that your attacks are quite rapid compared to other champions. The next champion on this list is going to be Tristana. So here you're going to see another gluttonous grease rush because it's simply so powerful on your champion, which is very strong around level 5 with the bonus of your ultimate and just being able to fast stack your bomb. Another rush for the Bloodthirster, and then we go for Navori Quick Blades into Infinity Edge. Alternatively, you can also go for the Magnetic Blast a little bit earlier if you have issues reaching enemy champions. Also, very important, if the enemy team doesn't have any armor, you don't need Mortal Reminder and can rather go for a more defensive item in the form of Shield Bow. But in the very late game, you really want to have Runans because your champion's damage through auto attacks just goes really crazy and the extra range you'll get generally is just overtuned. Not only this, but also the bonus ability haste or cooldown reduction you'll gain from the Runan's bolts critting will really help you with your Navori Quick Blades and reset on your first ability, second and third ability. To finish this build, because you're an auto attack centric champion, you'll go for Lethal Tempo, Brutal, Giant Slayer as per usual, Alacrity and Bone Plating for the laning phase. For the jungle department, we have Kha'Zix with a typical gluttonous grease rush. It's just the most powerful item you can get, which allows you to stay on the map indefinitely, especially in the rune combination with Bloodline. But here's a thing you can do which is very interesting. Even though Bloodthirster got a tiny bit of a nerf, you can go for a Bloodthirster rush to have even more sustain. However, if you rather want to go for the Assassin build, which is the Duskblade or Yuma's Ghostblade approach, you can certainly do so. All of these 3 items are a perfect choice for your first item after your gluttonous grease. After this, it's more about ability haste and just overall tankiness, which Black Cleaver will perfectly deal with. Alternatively, you can also go for the Edge of Night here just to make sure you have even more burst damage, but you'll lack ability haste and maybe some HP. After this, we'll go for Steric's Gauge, making it even more powerful, granting us so much extra health. So we have a lot of health from Black Cleaver or Edge of Night, and then Steric's adds another 400, and not to forget to mention, since we're running Overgrowth, we are getting even tankier, making all of the effects even more powerful. With all of this done, we are now focusing on our armor pen item. Here you can choose between the Anti-Healing or Silver's Grudge. And in case many people of you didn't know, slows in WildRift do indeed stack. So if your second ability on Kha'Zix, the evolved version, is slowing the enemy, then the Cyrilda will apply an extra added slow on top, which is slightly weaker than the Cyrilda's item slow. To make this one easier to understand, let's say you slow by 30% plus another 30%, you will not slow for 60%, but maybe for 40%. And if you're fighting a full AD team, Death Stance is one of the most beautiful items you can go for. As for runes, go for First Strike because you print money with this champion and deal a lot of extra damage on an isolated target. Gathering Storm because all the other alternatives aren't really as useful outside of Triumph, but Gathering Storm and the bonus AD for a champion is really powerful. Giant Slayer, Bloodline as I mentioned before, and obviously Overgrowth. Every jungle in this game, or at least most of them, always go for Overgrowth simply because it's so potent in the jungle department. No role gains as many stacks on this rune than the jungle role, and it's so efficient in a sense of giving you free stats to make games so much easier. And well, don't forget about the synergy with Steric's Gauge. Now let's talk about the Blind Monk Lee Sin. Here we start with a longsword, then we also start with a control ward which we place in the jungle where we want to path towards to, then we recall, swap towards the sweeper, and then we start our jungle with our third ability at the Krug camp. Then with this we'll fully clear our jungle and finish our clear at like 140, and then we can do whatever we want as we go for the scuttle crab. If we get the scuttle, which is very likely, we'll be level 5, then we can reset or go for a play and do literally whatever we want to do. As for items, you'll rush the gluttonous grease as fast as possible, which will make it impossible for you to have to recall. You basically can stand the map indefinitely as well, similar to Kha'Zix. For your first item, we go for Youmuu's Ghostblade into Trinity Force, and if you're facing a full AD team, we'll go for Death Stance. Then after this, as you can already imagine, we go for Starrick's Gage since we're also running Overgrowth, then either Guardian Angel or Cyrilda's Grudge, or maybe even an anti-healing item, which is going to be Mortal Reminder. For your enchants, it's going to be Protobelt or Stasis. And for the runes, you can basically make a decision. Do you want to go for Conqueror, which favors extended fights, or do you want to go for the one-tap scenario, which will be First Strike? As for the other runes, you'll have Triumph, a Giant Slayer, Legend Bloodline, very important for your sustain on the map, and Overgrowth. One of the easiest to play to have impact on champions right now is Zyra, and we have the perfect build for you that basically does everything for you. You're just playing tower defense. So start with an Amplifying Tomb or with your support item depending on what role you're playing. Then rush Boots of Mana as fast as possible because your mana issues are quite severe in the early game. For your first items, you can basically choose between Liandry's Torment, which is very powerful into high HP targets, or Rylai's Crystal Scepter, which is very potent when it comes to slowing down melee champions. However, you build the other item which you didn't build after this instantly. So your core will always be Liandry's Torment and Rylai's Crystal Scepter, or the Crystal Scepter into Liandry's Torment. After this, we go for Rabadon's Death Cap, then the Lovely Crown, and then the Infinity Orb. As for runes, you can basically choose between Airy, Glacial, and Electrocute, but I personally find Electrocute to be the most consistent. As for the other runes, you go for Gathering Storm, Giant Slayer, Bloodline because you like the extra added sustain, and Bone Plating. As you can play Zyra in the support role, the AD carry role, and the mid lane role, and occasionally even in the jungle if you truly want to push your limits, we have another support champion for you, and this time it's going to be Pike. Here we start with a Relic Shield and rush for the Armor Pen boots as fast as possible. Your champion is going to be very mobile on the map, so these boots will be very powerful, especially scaling your ultimate ability's execution threshold. As for your core items, you can basically choose between different options every single game. Duskblade is very powerful if you're snowballing, adding so much more damage to your potential. Youmuu's Ghostblade allows you to be faster on the map and just go for Outblade since you're so much faster. Edge of Night will really help you survive an enemy spell and make sure you can't get CC'd as you go for a play, and Serpent's Fang is just the most powerful item when it comes to dealing with shields. So the only thing that realistically changes for Pike is the order in which you build the items. If you need more damage, it's Duskblade. If you want to be faster, it's Youmuu's. If you need the anti-spell, it's Edge of Night, and if you need anti-shielding, it's Serpent's Fang. So you build all these items in this sequence depending on what you're facing and what you need in this moment. And after this, it's most of the time just Guardian Angel, but if you have trouble with some tanky targets and need to deal some extra damage with the help of more percentage armor pen, then it's Mortal Reminder. The more interesting thing here is the rune department. I really like for the support Pike at least the Glacial Augment, Nullifying Orb, Second Wind, Perseverance, and Pathfinder combo. This will allow me to play lane like an absolute demon and always have full HP regardless of what I'm doing. Not only this, I'll also be able to always rotate through the river being so fast thanks to the rune Water Walking, and even gain more sustain through it. And there's even more to it. So as a Pike, you've noticed that if you are hitting or getting hit by an enemy champion, as there are 2 enemy champions around, you'll get grey health. This grey health will be healed up once you go out of vision, but here's a little trick. So, if you get hit while you have Second Wind in your rune tab, you heal depending on the HP you're missing. However, the grey health doesn't really care about this one. So if you know, for example, that the enemy team has a low damage champion such as a Zyra in the early game that will spawn a plant and hit you for like 8 or 10, you can take an extra hit from this plant on like 20% HP to make sure that the grey health increases as well as the extra healing from second wind. Then you go into the river for a brief moment and you will fully heal as you're abusing multiple effects stacked on top of each other for more healing. It's an absolute powerful combo which you really have to have on your mind. And it's just so much more superior in the duo department than the red tree, because with the red tree you can actually die, and with this it's borderline impossible. Now let's show the Baron laners some love. Here we have Jax. As for your starter item, you will always start with a ruby crystal. This item will provide you with the most tankiness, and with the higher HP value you'll be able to deal more damage. Sounds a bit weird, but it's just how it goes. If you live longer, you'll be able to deal damage for an extended period of time. This is especially powerful because your best item rush is going to be boots. So depending on what damage type you're facing in the lane or the game, you'll go for plated or Mercury's. The next choice you have to make is between Divine Sundra and Trinity Force. Technically speaking, you can't do anything wrong by going for Divine Sundra. However, with Trinity Force you can snowball better. But here is just a question what you prefer the most. Because if you always rush Divine Sundra, you can't do anything wrong realistically speaking. But there will be games that will be way easier if you understand how to snowball with Trinity Force compared to Divine Sundra. The next item you're very much going to abuse is going to be Riftmaker. Here you can also make the decision between Riftmaker and Hullbreaker, but most of the time if you're facing something tankier and want some extra added sustain, then Riftmaker is going to be so powerful. Since your damage share is highly magical and physical at the same time, the bonus Omnivamp as well as the bonus damage will help you out so much. After this, you are going for Steric's Gauge. It is just so powerful to just have this item because you literally cannot die because you're so tanky. However, keep in mind you really want to have that Hullbreaker anywhere here because it's one of your biggest jobs that you do. You just split push. For your next item, you're going to do something a little bit more juicy, and it's going to be Nash's Tooth. You want the ability haste as well as the attack speed plus the magic damage of this item. At this point you'll be so much happier to have this item compared to Blade, you have absolutely no idea. The bonus damage of this item, or rather the on-hit item, is going to be magical damage. It also scales with physical and magical damage. So the magic on-hit item scales with all of your items as well as granting you more haste. And last but not least, you have the Guardian Angel. But please make sure to have a Hullbreaker. For your runes, here are multiple choices you can have. Number 1, you can go for Grasp, which is the safest approach when it comes to trading. Alternatively, it can be just Lethal Tempo. Courage of the Colossus, Second Wind, Overgrowth and Demolish are your go-to runes. Remember when I teased the Fiora thing last time? Let's talk about this. For your starter, you'll obviously go for a Ruby Crystal. After this, you'll go for Plated Steel Caps or Mercury Treads depending on what damage type you're facing. For your first core item, you have to make the same decision, Divine Sundra or Trinity Force. The same reasons apply as they did with Jax. Now after this, you'll go for Manamune. The reason for this is the following. If you spam your spells to push towers, you'll quickly run out of mana, and without Manamune it's borderline unplayable unless you have blue buff at all times. Once you have that in your pocket, you'll go for Hullbreaker, and after this it's Steric's Gauge and Death's Dance depending on what damage type you're facing. Obviously, you can also go for Amaranth Twin Guard, Guardian Angel or Spirit Visage, really depending on what damage type you're facing. For your enchantments, you either go for Protobelt or for Quicksilver. Protobelt will help you proc your ultimate so much faster, so it's most of the time the default choice. As for your runes, if you're more defensive, you can go for Resolve runes as well as Grasp of the Undying, but if you want to turbo stomp the game, it's about Conqueror, Brutal, Giant Slayer, Legend Bloodline, and obviously Demolish. And now let's talk about the strongest champion you can play when it comes to early snowballing, and it's going to be Jace in the mid lane or the Baron lane, but in this very instance it's going to be for the mid lane. So you'll start with a longsword and you're going to go for the armor pen boost as fast as possible. Your core items are going to be either Duskblade or Yuumu's Ghostblade. It really depends on what you prefer the most. Yuumu's Ghostblade again is for mobility and Duskblade for even more damage. If you want to add even more damage to your combo, then you go for Edge of Night afterwards. If you want more ability haste and more durability, then you're going for Black Cleaver, but most of the time Edge of Night will do a better job. After this, you'll go for Mortal Reminder or Cyrilda's Grudge. It really depends on what you're facing. With that done, you're now going to invest into Steric's Gauge for the extra added HP, as well as the bonus shield, because it will really come in clutch in the later stages of the game. For your last item, it's going to be Guardian Angel as the cookie cutter item. Boot Enchant, well, we're going to have Stasis, and as for your runes, First Strike, Sudden Impact, we can also go for Mark of the Week, but Empowered Attack will usually be better, Ivor Collector, and obviously bone plating for a way better laning experience since we want to go all in from level 1 instantly. For our last champion, we talk about the god of the map, which is Twisted Fate. In the early game he will take some time to scale up, but as the game goes on he'll turn into a massive nuke that literally kills anyone in his face. So for your starter items, you'll go for an Amplifying Tomb and rush for your Boots of Mana as fast as possible. After this, you go for Nash's Tooth and then for Lichbane. Many of you ask, why Lichbane? Lichbane provides you with a lot of tower push potential as well as bonus movement speed, and it also plays really well into your trading pattern, adding even more damage as a burst combo. After this, we go for Rabadon Staff Cap if we want more damage, or for the Magnetic Blaster if we need more range. However, you'll always go both items regardless. And as for your last item, if you really don't need it earlier already, you'll go for Crown of the Shattered Queen, making you basically invulnerable in a 1v1 scenario. For your boot enchant, most of the time it's going to be Protobelt just to reach the enemy and just inflict more pain. For your runes, we go for First Strike because it plays really well into how we are playing as a champion, and it grants you even more gold added to your third ability. For your runes, you can go for Gathering Storm or Brutal, but I recommend Gathering Storm because most of the time you barely get any value in early game from Brutal anyway, so you don't really need to force yourself into that hole. Then as per usual, it's going to be Giant Slayer, then it's Bloodline, and then Bone Plating. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and obviously come back for more RiftGuides content. See you soon.